Hi guys, welcome back to Econ Time with SK. So grab your notebooks, your favorite cup of coffee, and let's get started. So in this video, we are going to go more in depth into the production possibility curve and how it is linked to the concept of opportunity cost. Specifically in the last video, I had shown you that using some calculations, I'd shown you, Dekho, when you've got this PPF here. All right, so we've got this PPF here. Let's draw this out. What we saw was that opportunity cost, when you're moving from, let's say, here to here, the opportunity cost is low. But when you're like somewhere here, right here, moving from here to here, the opportunity cost is high. Okay, so we are going to try and understand why this is happening. But to understand this, first, I need to explain to you a bit about slopes and how that is linked to opportunity cost. Okay, so firstly, for any curve, actually, yeah, so let's just do a quick recap of what we mean by slope. Okay, so slope essentially is, let's see, so slope essentially is, let's say you've got a diagram that looks like this. All right. So if you've got something like this, let's say, so you've seen something like this, right? So let's call this point A. Let's call this point B. All right. So if you wanted to find out the slope of this line, slope of line above, you've seen this before. It's basically the change in y due to a change in x. So এটা হয়তো তোমরা স্কুল লাইফে করেছো, this would be y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. All right, so the slope essentially, so let's do that here, right? So in this curve, this is the y-axis, this is the x-axis, right? So let's say this is x1 and this of course is x2 and this is y1, this is y2. So slope ta jeta hobe, it is going to be essentially what you're doing is it is this change, so y2 minus y1, this is your what we are calling the change in y divided by x2 minus x1, tar mane this is your change in x. This is what gives you the slope. Slope essentially is telling you that if you were to change x by this particular amount, tahole how does y change based on the diagram you're looking at. So eta you can calculate for any graph, okay? So if you had a graph such as this, well, if you wanted to find the slope of this line, how would you do it, right? So again, y-axis, x-axis. Let's say, you always have to pick 2 points, right? So let's say this is M and this is N. So this is going to be, let's say you're moving from N to M. So this is going to be, let's say x1, this is x2, this is y1, this is y2. So again, the slope is basically going to be y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1, right? So the formula is always the same. The way of calculating slope is always the same. Essentially, it is looking at that আমি যদি x এতটুকু change করি তাহলে what is going to be my change in the y-axis. That's what the slope essentially tells you. Okay, so something more about slopes. Essentially, so I'm going to cover some extreme. All right, now before I go into the extreme, তোমাদের মাথায় একটা জিনিস রাখতে হবে যে this is an upward sloping curve, right? Upward sloping curve. Okay, so এখানে স্লোপের কিন্তু দুটো অংশ আছে। একটা হলো গিয়ে the value of the slope and আরেকটা হলো the sign of the slope. Okay, so the value of the slope and the sign of the slope. So এখানে যেহেতু এটা upward sloping মানেই তোমার sign of slope is going to be positive. Upward sloping মানে positive মানে there is a positive relationship between x and y. Positive relationship, like don't think of it as oh they like each other. Essentially what it means is যদি x বাড়ে তাহলে y ও বাড়বে. So the fact that they're both moving in the same direction, this is what is denoted by the positive sign. Okay. On the other hand, যখন এই downward sloping টা curve আছে, right? So this is a downward sloping curve মানে কি স্লোপটা হলো নেগেটিভ মানে কি যে x যখন বাড়ছে তখন দেখো y কিন্তু কমছে, তার মানে they move in opposite direction. This is what we mean by the negative relationship between x and y. That is why it is negatively sloped. Okay, তারপরে finally we've not come to the discussion of the value of the slope yet. That's what I'm going to be discussing next. So এখানে I'm going to show you some extreme conditions. Okay, এরকম যদি তোমার ডায়াগ্রাম হয় y axis x axis 0, ওকে, এখানে তাহলে তুমি দেখো তোমার স্লোপ, রিমেম্বার we said is change in y by change in x. So এখানে x টা কিন্তু কনস্ট্যান্ট, রাইট? সেম ভ্যালু অফ x, লেটস সে x1, এই ভ্যালুতে আমরা যে দেখছি যে y1 y2, so x remains the same, it's the y's that change, right? So তার মানে কি change in y is some, some positive number, right? But what's the change in x? x1 minus x1 is 0. So change in x কিন্তু নেই. So change in x যখন নেই, so what have we learned? This is some number divided by 0 কি হয়? Essentially we're saying this is going to become infinity. So right, as I was saying that when you've got this vertical line, then when you've got a graph which is vertical like this, তখন the value of the slope is infinity. On the other hand, let's say you've got a graph that is horizontal in nature. Okay, so this is y, this is x. Let's say it's got this horizontal curve. Horizontal curve slope, how do you calculate the slope? Remember we said it is change in y due to a change in x. So এখানে দেখি, let's pick any 2 points, right? So let's say the change in x, yeah, the x is going up. What about y? Y actually doesn't change, right? It just, even if whether you are at this point A or you are at this point B, the y value is the same. So আসলে কিন্তু change in y হলো 0 and change in x is some positive, like some number, right? So essentially what you have 0 divided by some number, right? And 0 divided by any number is 0. So essentially when you have a horizontal slope, তখন কিন্তু তোমার slope value হলো 0. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a continuum. All right, what do I mean by that? So let's just summarize what we've been saying. দেখো, যখন vertical হবে তখন আমি বলছি যে আমাদের slope is infinity. On the other hand, when it is going to be horizontal, in that case the slope is going to be 0. তার মানে এই দুটো এক্সট্রিমের স্লোপ ভ্যালু আমরা পাচ্ছি, রাইট? সো এনিথিং ইন বিটুইন দিস is going to be some value between infinity and 0. Okay, having said all of this, এখন let's go to the PPF. আমি roughly আগে তোমাকে বোঝাচ্ছি before we go back to the slides. So this is the PPF we've got. All right, so if you've got this PPF, so what are we seeing? Initially দেখো around this point তোমার slope কি flat? Is it more a horizontal curve or a vertical curve? So এখানে আমরা যেটা দেখছি slope হলো গিয়ে flat, তাহলে মানে it is closer to being horizontal. And what did we just learn? যখন slope curve টা পুরো flat হয়, পুরো horizontal হয়, তখন slope এর value হয় 0, তাই না? So actually it is close to 0. তারপরে as you're moving, let's say here or here or here, what's happening? What is happening to your slope? Your slope is getting steeper. Steeper মানে কি? It is getting closer to being a vertical diagram. If it's getting close to being vertical, তাহলে what's happening to the slope value? Slope value is going towards vertical হলে স্লোপটা কি হয় infinity, right? So it's going towards infinity. তার মানে আমরা আসলে কি দেখছি slope is going from a low value, right? It's going from a low value which is like around 0. As it gets steeper and steeper and steeper, it's actually going towards infinity. তার মানে actually without using any economics in here, I'm just using the mathematical concept of slope. I'm showing you that slope in the above diagram, slope is getting steeper, right? I'm showing you slope is getting steeper, which means that slope value is going from 0 to infinity. Okay, so that is what you need to remember about how we analyze slope. The slope যখন steeper হচ্ছে, it is going from 0 to infinity. Notice something. এখানে কিন্তু we are talking about the absolute value of slope. Absolute মানে কি? Absolute অথবা তোমরা হয়তো modulus দেখেছো in your high school journey. Absolute valueটা হলো গিয়ে যে ধরো you have some negative number like let's say minus 55. A number, let's say x is minus 55. আমরা যদি বলি যে আমাকে x এর absolute valueটা বের করে দাও, absolute value of x, we write it like this. I'm sure you've seen this, which means it is this, which means it is this. Okay, so absolute value মানে তুমি minus signটা ignore করে whatever the number is, you're focusing on the value of the number. Okay, so আসলে দেখো এখানে স্লোপটা কিন্তু it's always negatively sloped, right? Because it's a downward sloping curve. So downward sloping কিন্তু আমি আগে একটু ডিসকাশনে বলেছি যে whenever you have this downward sloping curve, তোমার it's actually there's a negative relationship, right, between RMG and rice, and we'll see that in a bit. Like the opportunity cost is যে একটা বাড়ালে একটা কমা, but that is your negative relationship. But আমরা যখন স্লোপের ভ্যালুটা interpret করি, we're trying to figure the slope বাড়ছে নাকি কমছে, we ignore that minus sign. Okay, the minus sign just tells me that there's a negative or a negative relationship between the two goods. But to understand whether the slope value is going up or down, আমাদের negative signটা ignore করতে হয়. That is why we look at the absolute value. So when we are looking at the absolute value, we are seeing that দেখো the absolute value of the slope is actually going from 0 to infinity, which means the slope is actually rising. So here, actually, we went into a lot of detail to understand slopes, and I'm going to give you time to digest that. And in the next video, I'm actually going to go into details on why the PPF, why it exhibits increasing opportunity cost. All right, guys, I shall see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.